Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's program. I'm Erin Greenwald, Vice President of Public Programs at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities and Editor-in-Chief of 64 Parishes magazine. I'm really pleased to welcome you to the second program of our 2021 season of Bright Lights Online, Conversations with 2021 Humanities Awards winners. For the last 36 years, the LEH Humanities Awards have honored the culture bearers, humanists, filmmakers, photographers, and more who provide access to and interpret Louisiana history and culture. We are proud to share their stories and explore their contributions on select Fridays in June and July through Bright Lights Online. The full schedule of all programs is available at leh.org. We hope to see you in the coming weeks for a rich series of conversations with some fascinating folks. And later this year, we look forward to celebrating the life and work of John T. Scott, the posthumous recipient of the LEH's highest honor, Humanist of the Year, when we open the Hellis Foundation John Scott Center on the first floor of our headquarters in downtown New Orleans. In today's Bright Lights Online conversation, we'll hear from Champion of Culture, Carol Bebelle, and interviewer Kelly Harris-DeBerry. The Champion of Culture Award recognizes individuals or organizations that have made a lasting mark through their support and promotion of Louisiana's cultural resources. Today's conversation is being recorded and streamed on Facebook Live using Zoom webinar. If you have a question you'd like answered during the question and answer period, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A icon is just at the bottom. If you hover over it and click, you'll be able to enter your question there. We've reserved about 15 minutes at the end of today's conversation for questions and answers. And we've also enabled closed captioning for today's program. If you're interested in activating closed captions on your device, locate the closed caption icon marked CC in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the screen, click it and select Show Subtitles. And now I'm delighted to welcome our guests for today's program. The LEH's 2021 Champion of Culture awardee is Carol Bebelle. As a native New Orleanian and co-founder of Ashé Cultural Arts Center, Bebelle has been a constant voice and advocate for the primal role of culture in establishing equity, justice, and compassion in American society for more than 40 years. After a first career in human service planning, Bebelle co-founded Ashé Cultural Arts Center in 1998 and served as the center's executive director for 21 amazing years. Since retiring in 2019, and we'll talk more about how retiring is a relative term later, Bebelle has a new creative venture, Akua Productions NOLA, a production communications facilitating, collaborating, and advising practice. Joining Carol today in conversation is Kelly Harris-DeBerry, who is the New Orleans Literary Coordinator for Poets and Writers. Harris-DeBerry received her MFA in Creative Writing from Lesley University and has received fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center and Cave Canem. Her book, Freedom Knows My Name, was released in August 2020. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you to all of the staff of LEH, and thank you all to those who are watching on Facebook or wherever you may be watching today. Mama Carol, it is such a pleasure to, well, we're always seemingly together in some kind of way, shape, or form. But when I was prepping for this interview, I was thinking about how did I meet Mama Carol? Like, I don't even remember how it started between us. I just know that you've always been there. And that had me thinking about myself and my peers and how we affectionately call you Mama Carol. And I was wondering if you could talk a little about the women that have mothered you both in your life and professionally, because I think that behind every great woman are great women.
Yeah, so my three major mothers as a child were my grandmother on my father's side, who I called Mama, and my mother, my birth mother, my mother, Evelyn, and my godmother, Marie. And among the three of them, my grandmother taking the first 12 years, because my parents divorced when I was very young. And my father's parents, embarrassed by his poor performance as a husband, just took on doing whatever they could do to help my mother so that she could get her life, together. And so I was with my grandmother for 12 years. And then my mother kind of finished ushering me to adulthood. My godmother was there all the time. And then in the expanded circle, it's like my everything from what I call sister girlfriends to my mother girlfriends. And so it's hard to list all of the names, but I have folks who I first started working with. Well, first of all, high school. I have my high school friends, one of which is still kind of one of my dearest sisters, Sharon Howard. And I'm her Bebelle. That's her affectionate pronunciation of my last name. And then my work circle of friends, key among those are like Viola Johnson and Melba Ferdinand, and then on to like Sheila Webb and Lynetta Gilbert and Jennifer Oliver Goodwin. And I have others that are around, around that. And so I'll just stop there because it kind of signifies several, circles. But, women who have seen me as sister, daughter, friend, and have been, cheerleaders. And then, in the spiritual direction, then I have people like Reverend Audrey Johnson and Ola Ila Dast and HMK Haringala and Asula. So I've had those women with Menhati. And so I've just, like I said, I just have this kind of field of beautiful, loving, and generous women who have encouraged me, who have pushed me along, and who have called forward from me a better Carol in all circumstances, and who have held my hand, who've seen me in valleys and all. And it's so funny to have them because my biologic family is full of men. So I have 2 brothers, 4 nephews, and 3 grandnephews. And the girls just have a hard time in my family. There's one in this generation, one in the next generation, and praise God, we got a 2nd girl coming along in the 3rd generation. So, so it's been being a part of all of that, and then getting from it what I did that really started to kind of seed a kind of understanding and an appreciation of something that I came to learn and to know as I went on as culture. Woman culture, African-American culture, African culture. It was in my friendship circle and all that the rest of my education got started. School gave me some stuff, but it was these people who really who schooled me. And so I have as much appreciation for what it is that I learned in school, but so much more appreciation for what it is that I learned from my teachers and mentors and, beloveds who helped to bring me along. Oh my goodness.
As we're talking, I was thinking, trying to imagine you as a girl in New Orleans. And I know that unlike many people in New Orleans, you didn't grow up Catholic, you grew up Baptist. And I'm interested to hear just how the blend of New Orleans culture and your religious upbringing kind of helped shape you as the artist that you would become, later on in life.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question because though I didn't grow up Catholic, I grew up in a Catholic community in New Orleans, in the 7th Ward. Mm-hmm. And so I was in those days, the kids got off from school to do their catechism and all. So I was the one that was asking the questions so that they could learn their catechism. So, who made you? God made you. Why did God make you? I was the one that was doing that. And then as time went on, I went to a Catholic university. So in a certain way, like the embrace of Christianity has been something that's been really thorough. It's not so much denominational for me. And my grandmother, understood the importance of culture in some kind of a way. And so we participated, we went to see Tootie when he came out, and I was dressed for Mardi Gras in a costume every year. I was on Claiborne Avenue, which is why the work that's happening in the CID is so critically important, because it was really a place where it's like a homecoming. There were people who lived there, but people who didn't live there anymore came back because they could see everybody on Mardi Gras Day. And of course, because we were my grandfather was a minister, a popular minister in the 7th Ward. There were funerals. And so you got an opportunity to see the things that happened around funerals. And so this blend of being able to see how the sacredness of culture, that is not just about the spiritual part of it, but it's also about the populist part of it and where the people are, was something that was just a fusion that, that no one saw the necessity of needing to separate, for me when I was young. And if there was a separation, I didn't get it.
Well, this award that you have received from the Louisiana Endowment for Humanities is called the Champion of Culture, but everybody knows you've been championing culture for a very long time in New Orleans. And so I want to shift a little bit to talk about the beloved Ashé Cultural Arts Center and all your work there. And it sounds to me, I was asking you some of those background questions because, no one just suddenly arrives at a champion of culture. There's a history, there's a timeline, there's a journey. And so can you talk a little bit about, because I've heard you say before that when you and Baba Doug Red were creating and imagining the Ashé Cultural Arts Center, it was important for you to really put an emphasis on culture. And so I just want to hear just what it was like to dream of something and what it's like to see this building that you dreamed of, and that we can walk into a dream, and just all of those things, those beautiful things about Ashé.
Yeah. So I think that a little bit before Ashé happened, I kind of left the public sector after over 20 years. And my side work then was, both from a volunteer perspective and sometimes for hire, was working along with people in the community who were doing things, cultural folks who were doing cultural work, who were doing, work related to church or doing community-based programs. And I think it was, I had begun to, like I said, collect an awareness of something, that I was working in $1 million programs, which were doing good jobs, but every time somebody rotated out of a seat, there was always somebody to rotate into the seat. And then I'm working in the community with folks who have pennies by comparison, and the durability of the work, the impact of the work is just so impressive, right? And so I'm really discovering, and again, this friendship circle is bringing me more and more and more into the understanding about Africanity, our connection to it, the core elements of it, how it connects to New Orleans and all of that. And I began to, through the, kind of the mentorship and friendship of Melba Ferdinand and Kenneth Ferdinand, to be able to learn about the work of Ahidiana and the Dopre Center. And I began to see what was happening with our children in an environment where they were made to understand how they were connected to something other than a history of enslavement. They were made to know about like the brilliant history of Africans and all of that. And then things just started to click, I got to like midlife crisis, I guess you might call it. I think Doug probably was there too. Congo Square Collective at that time was, doing work once again around these issues that have to do with Congo Square and the history of New Orleans, and an opportunity presented itself. And the opportunity was to be able to have a space, and at this time I'm hearing from people like, I heard you talk about John Scott and James Borders and Boulevard. All of these folks are talking about the fact that there is no place that we have the key to, where we can decide to do something and just walk in, and do it, that we've always got to beg, borrow, steal space to be able to do the things that we want to do. And so Doug got it first, because I had come out of a world where you plan and you get stuff together and all of that. So I didn't see where the money was going to come from and all. And, Doug was ready. And it took me like 6 months to catch up with him. And then we went on ahead and signed the lease, really in the name of his company at the first time, because I was afraid that the board was going to go, we can't manage to do this. And so that way we could keep the lease if it worked out that we didn't get the support that we thought that we needed. But I understood that the culture was the beginning and the ending really of everything. It's what defines us. It's what inspires us, and it's also what heals us. And so all of this work I've been doing in human services, were there ways in which the aches of our community could be defined through a cultural lens, because people then are more receptive to taking the remedy when it shows it looks like something that's intended for them, So that's really kind of the impetus and the entree that's kind of moved us there. And like I said, I was ready for a passion. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I was ready for a great, a grand passion in my life. And that's what Ashé became. It became a place to practice everything that we had learned, everything we thought, everything, it was a world that we had like complete control over. And that everybody who came in it changed it. And had something to contribute. And along those lines, I mean, in the early days, people like Ola Iladas were like invaluable because she saw that potential. And then she just kind of walked with us, and whether it was just showing up to give a hand or deciding to sit with a tired executive director who's going to be working late into the night so she wouldn't be there alone, whatever was required, or young people like Asali and Hollywood and Lydia Raya, who are now the next generation of leadership, who were around to do whatever you asked them to do. It was just like, okay, we got it. Don't worry about it. And so it became a magnificent obsession of sorts that lots and lots of people became a part of it. The whole notion, and by the time we got to buy the property and to get even more property and that kind of thing, to be able to do the work, people became more and more convinced. And I guess something that was so, I guess that taught me something is that when we did the renovation, because one of the people who was really, really critical in being able to situate us inside of government money for sure was Senator Diana Bourgeois. And so when we were doing the renovation, things were all messed up in the front and, we're closed and all of that. And so Diana said she was riding down the street. She said, I almost had a wreck. She said, because she saw that and didn't know about the renovation. And she instantly thought that we had lost the property. And she was just like, why didn't Carol call me? Why didn't she say anything to me? When I thought about it later, though, it told me something else. It was certainly comical at the time, but then I thought about it, that she had been instrumental in being able to situate the money for us, et cetera, et cetera. And if she could feel like us possessing property was so tenuous, like what could everyday people think? Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it's like I got an added appreciation for the gift and the blessing that had been awarded to us to be stewards and guardians of this property for the community, and so now we have a next generation of leadership that really understands that to the bone, and is building on that and acquiring even more property for the community for cultural purposes, et cetera. And so I just am so I'm so thankful for that. And then simultaneous with like this piece that is the drive for culture was a community that understood that this corridor had a very special place in the city, and that they wanted to fight as long as they could to hold on to it in the potential of it becoming a cultural corridor, because it once was a cultural corridor, and they wanted that back. And so what we did was then what we were dreaming, and I've said this everywhere I go, is that Habakkuk 2:2 has been a guiding principle in my life. It was a kind of a gift given to me by a minister who I used to help with his writing. Like when he had ideas, I'd write them down. And he said to me, he said that this is something that I just had was given to give to you, and I've allowed it to drive my my life. And it's in the scripture says that write the vision down plainly on tablets, because the vision has its time. It presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it shall surely come. And so I think that I have now had the opportunity to live inside of the prophecy of that scripture in this work, in this community, because this community has written down its vision for this community so many times. That's not even funny. When we came in, I think there were 30 or 40 plans of one kind or another that had been done on Central City. And we finally got Tulane to be able to put together an executive summary of all of them. And that's what Doug and I started with. We didn't try to get another planning process together. We just looked at what people had been asking for decades. And we started working with that. And so I think that Ashé in many ways was an idea whose time had come for many people, many communities. It was definitely an idea whose time had come for the cultural community, but it was also an idea whose time had come for the Central City community, in terms of wanting a kind of to have this spine to its community, this intimate spine to its community, which is a little bit different than what Claiborne is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Go ahead.
To be something that was culturally motivating.
First, I want to thank you for answering about 5 of my questions in that one question. So I appreciate that. I'm wondering, I know people may be thinking I'm not asking enough questions, but you're answering so many of the questions that I had. I want to pivot on Central City for a second, because you are in this tradition, in this timeline of Aretha Castle Haley. And for those who may not know, can you talk about the story of how Jerome Big Duck Smith played a role in the naming of
Sure, I'll be happy.
And that connection with Aretha Castle Haley, and yeah, just can you talk about that, because everybody doesn't know that story.
Yeah. So Aretha was a freedom rider, and importantly, she was a highly respected, woman leader in the movement. And it means something because all of us have been, influenced and affected by patriarchy. And so to have a woman who was leader in the 60s, in the 50s is something else. But she came from a family. Her mother, Virgie, and her father, John, we recently celebrated Dookie Chase for being a place that people gathered and ate and all of that. Well, Virgie worked at Dookie's, and many of those people who gathered and ate there slept at Virgie and John's house, Aretha Castle Haley's parents' home, And at one point in time, Jerome Smith resided in a structure that's in the back. And so did Dodie Fitzsimmons, and so there's a whole energy around the movement that is around the house on 917 North Durgeois, I think it is, and it's called the Freedom House. And so when we finally got the space, and we were trying to think of a name for the organization, I should say, because the organization that is the corporate sponsor for Ashé is called Efforts of Grace. A lot of people don't know that Ashé Cultural Arts Center is the name of the work that happens in the space, the name of the space, but the corporate nonprofit that essentially guides the work there is Efforts of Grace. And so we were trying to get that together. And, you know, everybody was coming up with all kinds of names and that kind of stuff. And I wound up giving Jerome a ride one evening, and we would, you know, we were just chatting and exchanging, you know, updates and that kind of thing. And then when I dropped him off, I said, Jerome, I said, we're in the middle of trying to come up with a name for the corporation at that point in time. And so I'm explaining to him what we're trying to do and all this kind of stuff. And he, in his search for a name, kind of said, yeah, I know what you're talking about, like an efforts of grace kind of thing, da 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 da. And I said, stop. I said, stop. I said, I think you just named us. And so, so Efforts of Grace, that name is a name that was bestowed on us by Jerome Smith. And Ashé Cultural Arts Center was really, you know, between Doug and I are thinking about the matter of what Ashé means. This West African word that means it comes closest to meaning what amen means, which is the ability to make things happen. You know, and for it to be able to make things happen, Cultural Arts Center, using culture and art, and which is what became the mission. That the mission was the matter of doing community, human and economic development using culture and art. That's the mission for, you know, for Ashé. And the kind of the mission for the corridor was to be able to use community, culture, and commerce. Those are the themes of the corridor. And so, you know, kind of stepping into the dreams and the wishes of the community, the manifesto that the Central City has, which is a vision of what they'd like to, you know, what we'd like the community to be, because I'm now a resident here, in addition to having had the, you know, the extreme privilege of having established institution here. And so it's the whole matter of putting those, that kind of trinity together. That's another kind of trinity. You know, the people and the culture that binds them and resources is what it takes to make a good and healthy community.
Before we go any further, we're about 25 minutes in, and I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about what you're working on now and some other things. I want to pause just to say thank you on behalf of, thank you from me, but also thank you from so many people for all the years, all the work, all that you put into Ashé. It is truly a gift. And I know that you described it as your grand passion, but what you and Doug Red and so many others were able to create in Ashé is a gift that we will have for a very, 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 very long time. And so if no one has told you thank you recently, I just wanted to pause to say thank you. Truly,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
One thing that's great about working in and with community is that there have been little and big thank yous all along the way. And what I say is that I just am so grateful that that at a time was a space in my spirit, in my life, that God saw fit to be able to open a pathway that Doug and I could kind of work through, where we could manage to be useful, you know, servant leaders for the community. And so it's the best of all worlds to be in that situation, to have a call and to be able to answer it and to have it fulfilled.
You've been living this sacred life, and you have been challenging everyone that you know to live a sacred life, to find your path, find your purpose. And you often mention and talk about weism, and you talk about this, you have this mantra about weism. Can you talk a little bit about that? And inside of that, you also talk about radical hopefulness as well. And I'm trying to be more radical in my hopefulness as well. So talk about those things for us.
Sure. So I think that with so much disparity in the world, and particularly as it relates to my community, community of Black folks around the world, really, that you know, that it's really easy to fill yourself with the angst and the anger and the drive and and then miss the opportunity to understand that the reason we're here is because there was a time at which other people did not see us as fully human. They didn't recognize the sacredness of our humanity, the fullness of it, the completeness of it, being equal to theirs. And that that the world that's the better world is the world where we all are fully in possession of our humanity, and that we can count on each other to recognize it. And I think in the fight and the struggle to be able to gain that, and not to just gain it in word, but to gain it in form and content, that we can't lose the fact that the ultimate thing is that we really need to all sit in the circle. And so in a certain way, the extent to which we are able and willing to extend our concept of we, of who we're talking about when we say we. Sometimes it's our family, sometimes it's our friends, sometimes it's people who look mostly like us, sometimes it's women when we're talking about men, you know, you know, sometimes it's people who are straight when we're talking about people who are inside of the LGBTQ community, or whether it works out to be Christians, when it works out, there are other kinds of people. When we're able to embrace the wider and the widest we, without not needing to essentially set ourselves away from them, then that's going to be when we're on our way to being able to create a world where babies that are born into it are going to have a better time of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that I figured out I've been on 4 fronts. You know, it's like it was education first. We elected the first parent to the first school board. Then after that, it was substance abuse. Okay, and then after that, it was public health. Mm-hmm. You know, and we were driving the issues that have to do with prenatal care, and we were with disparity, et cetera. You know, and then after that, it was culture. You know, that I think that I've probably done what I can do on the front line. And that it's time for me to use what I've learned there to understand what are some of the things that we need to attend to that may not feel like they're so priority now. You know, I mean, culture is the place that defines us. It's also the place that heals us. That's where you take power. That's why you take pain rather, and you can transform it into power. It's through the healing process. And all of those things are a part of being inside of a willingness to be empathetic and compassionate, inside of how it is that we expand our concept of we. So anyways, I have, you know, I've decided that that's one of the things that I'm working on. And the issue of radical hopefulness is like, I feel for myself, I feel like as a Black person, I can't sit here and look at and learn from Hannah Nicole Smith in the 1619 reality, as well as the project, and not be hopeful, because I, you know, like the journey of our people during that period of time has been sufficient at every almost decade to have been grand enough to destroy us, and we're still here, and that is an enduring lesson of hope that we should not ever forget. Yeah. And so that is resilience to the max, the X degree. Mm-hmm. And we can be radical in resistance and radical in our thinking and radical in our race theory, then certainly we can be radical in our hopefulness. And so I think that these are 2 things to encourage. We can't let the light go out on those things, you know, that we have bright shining lights on all of these other radicals. We've got bright lights shining on resistance and movement building and all of that. And we also have to be certain that we do not have a flickering and a going out light on hopefulness and expanding and remaking.
Has there been a moment in your life, and I'm sure there has been, where you've had to dig deep into your radical hopefulness bag to sustain yourself, to push through something very difficult, and I see a question here. Someone text me a question. How does Carol get through tough times? Because she always seems so hopeful. So can you, I'm weaving that into a follow-up question for you.
Well, I really am in a period kind of like that right now. I've disconnected myself for about the last 6 weeks because I just found myself in a melancholy that I was not accustomed to. And I have 2 pieces of medicine that are always helpful for me. One is Diane Reeves' Testify, and the other one is Asali Divine's 19 Times.
Yes.
And so if I hit rock bottom, and I pray God that I don't wind up doing that, and I'm nowhere close to that. But I'm definitely I'm not in my balance zone. There's the balance zone, and then there's the, kind of the piece above. I'm below the bat.
Yes.
And so it is, I just count on culture, and more recently I've been playing around with making music. And I count on my people. It's like I count on the folks that I encounter on a day-to-day basis. They come in and I'm able to kind of borrow some spirit from them. And the folks that I get to talk with on the phone, that are my friends, are the ones that come and drag me out. And, and so I count on the very same things that make a healthy community, community and culture and commerce. I count on those very same things. That formula works at every level.
And what you just said, I think, is a takeaway for all of us, and that is to count on culture. Count on culture. And that we can always count on it. It shows up in our children. It shows up, in the church. It shows up everywhere, and particularly in New Orleans, that it's a way of living. And so I thank you for that. I wanted to
say one other thing. My mother, time ago, used to say things. She used to say this particular thing. She would say, like, she'd turn the pots off, or she'd stop doing what she was doing. She said, "I'm going to go she said, I'm going to go sit down and listen to Ray Charles till my mind change." But when I was, I didn't know what in the world my mother was talking about. But she gave me the formula, and I didn't know it. And so I think that it was available to me. I came to the place where I needed it. And it's not Ray Charles all the time, but definitely being able to go to listen to somebody, my mind.
One more question. And by the way, you mentioned that you were creating music and that you're still writing poetry. For those who don't know, Mama Carol is a fantastic poet. She's also a singer. I was able to preview some music that is coming out next week. And can you talk a little bit about that? And the Facebook page, and please follow Mama Carol's Facebook page, which is Accor Productions NOLA, where you can find out all the latest things that she's working on. But tell us a little bit about what we should look for next week from you. And then I will follow that up with one short question. And then you have a few questions from the audience, from the viewers.
Sure. Inspiration can come from anywhere. What is it? Inspiration is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Well, I was looking at I was looking at a show on TV where Oprah and Ava were talking with the Central Park Five, and Brother Yusef Salam was talking about, I think he had a book out, and he was talking, and somebody asked him something about 2020. He said, well, 2020 is perfect vision. And it just stayed in my mind. And it's for 2 reasons. One is that my mind works like that. When I hear these like little things that are connected, it always grabs them. And so first of all, it was like I was saying, girl, how did you miss that? Like, how did that not cross your mind before that? You really are getting old. And then as time went on, it grew into a piece that I created with the fabulous Joy Clark and Sula Spirit, called the 2020 Blues. And so I'm gonna be kind of putting it out in the world next week. closer to the Ma'afa commemoration. And so there's that. And so, yeah, so that, but I have a collection of music that I'm working on that's called Little Pieces, a Medicine Bag. And it's very much about the conversation we're having in terms of where I find myself in this place between with remaking and radical hopefulness. I think every person that has lived on this planet over the last year and a half has found themselves a bit more fragile, a bit more vulnerable. And I think that I've told people that I think that God put in a divine correction, and that our job is not to just react to the fear of what was given to us, but to understand what are the new places that we can grow and be and come from now that we've gone through this thing that we've gone through. I think that there are implications about us in our relationships. There are implications about discovering the sturdiness and the enduring necessity of love, and how it looks in all of its many ways. And I think that the drive to compete and the drive to excel are very important, but they're important in balance with these other drives that are about sustaining and nurturing and supporting. We live between the bookends of belonging, which is the gene that drives us to culture, and becoming, which is the gift that our life is, that every day that we get the opportunity to be able to build on and to learn. And so my this music is coming from that place. It's intimate and it's also universal. And so I just give great thanks to Sula for having essentially dragged me into the process. I started to write lyrics, and I find myself in the middle of making music, and it's to her credit. And it's been great to be a follower, and to get the opportunity to do that, and to kind of sit back and to kind of just feel things and see things, and understand that if it's a really horrible day, that the night's gonna come. I'm gonna go to bed, and God willing, I'm gonna wake up in the morning with a different mind.
And so we have a few questions. We have actually a couple of questions. And so I'm going to ask if there's a way that we can knock out all these questions with kind of short answers so that we can stay in our time frame. So the first question is from Nico, and he wants to know, is there a particular poet or poets that inspire you? You mentioned Asali Divine, who's also the new executive director of Ashé. Is there another that you would like?
Yeah. Yes, Sonny Patterson, Icon Sibley, Hollywood, that's, these are just some of, Brenda Marie Osby, and then, the folks who kind of introduced me to poetry, the Maya Angelou's, one of my early roommates, wildest, bro, Nikki Giovanni, so I love this young woman, Amanda, the inaugural poem.
Amanda Gorman.
It's hard to run a list, because.
Well, we gave him a list. We gave him a good list. Yeah.
Io, it's like.
Nico, I'm gonna suggest this book for Nico. I Am New Orleans, which is the new anthology. All the folks that you just mentioned are in there. It is from the Renegade Press, University of New Orleans. If you go buy that book, I Am New Orleans, almost every poet that Mama Carol just mentioned is in that collection, and that's a great place to start.
And I'd like to say this thing real quickly, that in many ways, we have the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Newest Testament. And the Newest Testament is being brought by these prophets who we call poets. and that there are more people who should be listening, because they are really bringing us the word.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Brenda Williams wants to know, and what is your wildest dream, just one dream, for the future of what you and Doug started?
My wildest dream, good Lord, what is the question there, huh? Well, my wildest dream is that money will continue to assemble to the extent that Ashé has an endowment, and that there is never any more concern about money because the endowment provides the money that's needed to do things. And that the full attention can be on being able to bring community, culture, and commerce together.
Okay. Let's pray that that happens. Thank you, Ms. Brenda, for your question. Thank you for watching. I have an anonymous, I'm not sure who this person is, it doesn't have a name. And they have a couple of questions here, but I'm going to just pull one from the many that are there. This person says, I'm wondering if culture as a cure is a cure for trauma or inspiration for hopelessness. It's easier to get buy-in from the public here in a city that discusses culture so frequently.
Yeah, the answer is a bold yes. I think that culture is the cure for a lot of stuff. I think the issues that we deal with in terms of the tensions that there are in our society and all of that at some levels are really culture clashes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the issue of completing and correcting the history, being able to do the cognitive work,
Mm-hmm.
bringing more facts and all together, and then creating ways in which people can reconcile their differences, their emotional differences.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I think the core element is that there is a part of the world that has dehumanized the other part of the world, and it has made it possible for them to do horrific things to the folks who were less than human,
Mm-hmm.
and in their eyesight. And so I think that being able to build these ways in which we change that, because culture is not the same for everybody, but the things that are attended to in culture are the same for everybody. The things that help us to belong are the same for everybody. Being able to be valued, to be nurtured, to be cared for, to be certain that the things that you need to be alive, all of these things are in each person's cultural framing.
Mm-hmm.
And so culture is the core element of the human experience.
Thank you. There's another question, and I think you've answered it. You just answered it. This person is asking, do you think that American culture focuses too much on family relationships without discussing the power and influence of friendship? And I think you've just kind of answered that. And you answered that in the beginning with when you did kind of a roll call of the women and who have been vital to your professional and personal life.
What I will say is that that family is not just a word that determines biology.
Mm-hmm.
And so that there's something that I have kind of created for myself that's called the cultural continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And the cultural continuum works like this. Cultural rooting, that's like you're born into a given circumstance, and it has a very an advantage on influencing you on who you will become. And then you bear that. So it's culture bearing, okay? Then there's culture bridging. At some point in your life, you start noticing other things, or things start coming from you, and you start bridging. So you're not just purely doing what it is that you were given going on. And then there's culture making. And so I think that in American society that we really need to recognize all that and see this bridging and bearing thing, this bridging and making thing, that's where the magic happens. That's where the work of making it possible and making us compatible and having us be able to get, to learn to be able to reside and to work together and to look out for each other's backs occurs.
So before I give you this last question, again, I want to remind people to check out Akua Productions Nola on Facebook, and that will take you to all the other things that she's been working on, producing, art for the census, art for voting, and so many other great things. So Mama Carol is still around producing and doing wonderful things. So check out Akua Productions NOLA. This last question, I'm going to weave that into one more question. This person says that they need hope. And they were trying to, they were wondering about these pieces of medicine that you mentioned. In a meeting a while back, you talked about we need to stop calling people out and start calling people in. Can you give me 3 things, if you can, before I hand this back over to LEH, 3 things that you want to call us into in this time in our city, in our country, and as a community? What 3 things do you want to call us into in this present time?
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Well, I think just that, calling people in. Well, first of all, it's going in first. So I think the first thing is that in this period where we're all feeling probably more fragile and vulnerable than we have in our lifetimes, to reckon with the fragility and the and those feelings, and to own them and to recognize that you don't have those alone. And the very things that you would like to have are the things that everyone else would like to have. And to try to be willing to be bringing that forward and available to other people. What it looks like is, if somebody is being froggish, as the old folks used to say, somebody's being wild and acting out or being throwed off, as some others might say, then don't step into that. To understand that they're having a bad day. And that your addition to it, regardless of how affronting it may feel to you, particularly if you have the ability to think about it, might be the thing that the space that they need to do it. And so being inside of yourself, coming to reckon with your own vulnerabilities and understanding that they also are present in others. That's the first thing. The second thing is to be a blessing where you can. I think that before this epidemic happened, everybody was kind of like, well, that's not none of my business, so I'm just gonna leave that alone. I'm not inviting people to try to be fixers, but I am inviting people to be brave enough sometimes to be able to give that helping hand, or that quiet word, or that calming assist, to others. I have received that, and I've been able to give that at times, and it's just nothing like it. The third thing is that that you decide to just make the decision that you're going to hold on. That's what radical hopefulness means. That means I cannot tell you. Everybody's got their own stories, but I cannot tell you the times that I went to bed in full distress, hardly able to sleep, stomach upset, the whole 9 yards, because I didn't know that things were going to be all right the next day for Ashé. And the next morning I woke up and a phone call came through or something else happened. And all of a sudden that thing that I'd worried all night, not gotten a good night's sleep over, was taken care of. And so the fact that we are here today is proof positive that hope is something that exists, because I'm totally convinced that our ancestors, the ones that were snatched, the ones that made it through the boat ride, the ones that lived through the seasons of slavery, I am convinced that part of what made it possible for them to go through what they went through was because they saw us showing up. And as bad as you may think it is for us today, I am totally aware that it is not at all anywhere close to what they had to go through. And that, for me, is what defines the reason for us to hope on the days that it's hard. And if you have not heard 19 times, then you need to go and listen to it. It's on Ashé's YouTube, and you need to listen to it, because again, this is the thing that defines hopefulness. The faith that they could have, that we would be here today, has got to be the faith that we're going to have. that we can make something wonderful out of a mess, that we can fix things that need to be that are broken, and that we can create a world that is better than the world that we have today for the children that are coming through.
And with that, we thank you, Carol Bebelle, 2021 Champion of Culture. What an amazing conversation. Was glad to be with you and to have this conversation with you. Thank you. Thank you, LEH. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you all for watching, for viewing. Please share this video, this conversation with others, because I think there are so many gems and nuggets that we can all take away from this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank both of you. This conversation has been enlightening. And, you know, Carol, you don't know this, but you were the first person whose home I entered after over a year of being in isolation during the pandemic. And I brought your award to you in your apartment. And radical hopefulness is contagious. Carol, it was just so amazing to kind of just be normal and have a conversation. And I think the embrace of radical hopefulness is truly something that we should all aspire to. Thank you both for all of the work that you do. I mean, Kelly, you're such an amazing culture bearer in your own right. And Carol, we can't wait to hear what's next for you. We appreciate you being here in New Orleans and being alive in this time and place. For all of you who have joined us today, we hope that you'll join us again next Friday, June 25th at 11 o'clock for another conversation. Next week's talk will be with documentary photographer of the year, Abdul Aziz. Aziz is one of the most amazing photographers of the current moment, I would say, and that's not just for New Orleans. I think Aziz is doing incredibly important work documenting the social justice movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the push toward more equal treatment by police, against police brutality. Aziz will be in conversation with another really fascinating person. CJ Hunt is a documentarian. He's a producer for The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. These guys are going to be talking next week at 11 o'clock, and we hope to see you there. You can register for that program and all future Bright Lights Online programs at leh.org. Thanks to you both, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.